Hi everyone, welcome to another video. I'm Neel Mukherjee and today is another video about the books that I have read for my Around the World project, focusing this time on Asia. I've read 5 countries until now, which are China, India, Myanmar, Cambodia and South Korea. So let's get cracking. I'm going to start with India, for which I've read the book The Life of Others by Neel Mukherjee. The Life of Others is a family saga that takes place in Calcutta in India, in the Bengal region to be specific, in 1967. We meet the Ghosh family and they live in a huge house with multiple floors, and on each floor lives one of the sons or daughters of the grandparents. The grandparents live on the topmost floor, they are the head of the family. The grandfather is a self-made man who's an entrepreneur and has his own company, which is the reason that the family is so wealthy. And the grandmother reigns over the lives of her children, even though these children now already have their own children. And all of these sons and daughters live in the same house with their children, and they all have different socioeconomic statuses, both outside the house and inside the house, which makes it interesting and gives us a perspective on different parts of the Indian life, even though this is a wealthy family, but they all have different educations. The eldest son, Adinash, lives on the topmost floor under his father and mother, and he is supposed to inherit the family business, and his wife is the one that, after the grandmother, has most power in the house. Now, like all eldest sons who have a set path set in front of them, Adinash does not actually want to take over the family business, and he wants to find his own path in life. We then have one son that does want to take over the business and has the power, but he's very distracted by his own sexual desires. We have an unmarried daughter who's very angry and terrorizes the whole family. We've got a son that uses the family business and the family money to publish the works of artist friends that he wants to help. And we have got the youngest son who isn't alive anymore, who left behind a wife and I think 2 kids. And that wife lives on the ground floor, and she is seen by the family as a servant, and she's treated as such. And it was interesting in that sense that depending on your role in the house and therefore in society, you live on a different floor. So the lowest people are on the lowest floor, and the one that are highest ranking live on the highest floor. So we've got a very nice set of characters in the house, and then we have the eldest son of the eldest son, who is Supratik, who is the son of Adinash. He ran away from home because he realized his family is very wealthy and he wants to step away from that, and he joined a political party that work from rural areas and want to find people to help them take over power. So half of the book is his story and half of the book is all of the characters that live in the house, who have very different personalities and very different problems going on, which I liked because it gave me an idea, like I said, of different ways of living in India. So the book follows all of these characters, and there are a lot, so sometimes it's hard to, first of all, get into the book and understand who everybody is, and not all the characters are as interesting. And the story is not written in a chronological order, so that sometimes makes it a bit hard. The book is rather long, and it might at some points be too long, and that is also one of the reasons that it got so many mixed reviews. But as it gave me insights into different layers of society in Bengal, in India, I was happy because that is what I wanted. Then we've got the book that I've read that is set in Myanmar, which is The Pianotunner by Daniel Mason. Initially, when I read this, I borrowed this book from a friend, and I absolutely loved it, and it was my favorite book of that year. I think I read it 2 years ago, And I actually got this copy 2 weeks ago from a secondhand bookshop, and I was really happy I found it because I absolutely love this book, and it is already quite old. The Pianotunner is set in the late 20th century, and we meet Edgar Drake, who is, as you can guess, a piano tuner. And he mainly tunes a very specific, rare old piano. And he is accosted by the British Army, he is British, to go to Myanmar, which was still called Burma at the time, to tune one of these pianos. And the piano is owned by a very eclectic surgeon who has a very important role in keeping Burma part of the empire. So the army basically does everything that this surgeon wants, including getting a very rare old piano to the middle of the jungle in Burma/Myanmar, and then getting one of the two tuners in the land to go tune that actual piano. As you can guess, Edgar goes on his trip, and this was still at a time where a voyage was still an actual voyage, so he moves through different countries, and especially in Burma, he gets to know more about this culture, and he ends up getting to the piano and tuning it and meeting this very special surgeon. Now, you might say, very rightly so, that this book is not written by an author from Myanmar, and that is not even from the point of view of someone that is from Myanmar. But the piano tuner is such a soft and curious soul that the way we see the culture through his eyes is still a way that we do learn a lot, and he's not imposing his own views. He's not seeing it as this barbaric country. It's still a discovery of the country. And the army surgeon is in fact in contact with very important tribal chiefs in the area, and he's not necessarily playing the part that a traditional colonialist in the army has. So we do get kind of a different point of view, and still a point of view that felt as if it somehow came from Myanmar, but through eyes that I could more easily understand, not having been to the country. I won't say more than that. I absolutely love this book. It's very atmospheric, and I really love the way it was written. But if you know a really good book that is from a Myanmar author, then please let me know. I would still recommend you reading this book. Also, this one is such a wonderful copy, you know, with still the yellow pages and stuff, which I love. Next, I want to talk about the book that I've read that is set in China. China is a huge country, so obviously this book only grabs a part of that. And the book that I read is called Pearl of China by Anchee. The book begins in a small town called Xinjiang on the bank of the Yangtze River, and it's at the end of the 19th century, and we meet two girls who become fast friends and how their relationship and friendship evolves. One of these girls is the narrator, is Willow. She's Chinese, and her parents and therefore herself are very poor, and she hardly has anything to eat like most of the people living in the village. And she meets and eventually becomes friends with Pearl, who is the daughter of a Christian missionary who went to China to convert more people to Christianity. And Pearl has blonde hair, which is different, and she does not want that and wants to learn Chinese as fast as possible so she can start mingling and having friends. So she's very happy when she meets Willow, and they form this friendship, and their friendship lasts decades. So through them growing up in the village, dealing with the poverty and the father of Pearl being very eclectic, them then going to study and starting to follow different paths, but still having this tight relationship, friendship. They still talk when they both start having relationships, and Pearl becomes a writer, and she writes about the poor people that live in rural China, and the international community likes her books, and she even gets a Pulitzer Prize for that. And on the other hand, Willow follows the politics of Mao in the time that Mao was coming to power, and as you can guess, those people did not like her being friends with a white woman with blonde hair who talks about the poor people in China, because the idea was that there were no poor people in China because communism was the way to go. What I remember most from this book is that one of the reasons that Pearl's father managed to convert so many people at the time was because after Mass he gave food, and the people were so poor that they didn't really care what hand it was that gave them food. They just wanted anything to survive. So they were fine with converting to Christianity. And especially because China is so huge and has such a long and rich history and culture, it was interesting to read about the missionary work in China. So I appreciated reading about this blonde woman who really loves China, but who is not really accepted by its people, obviously. At the same time, to also read about a woman who fights for the communist beliefs. So I did appreciate this book. Not enough to keep it though. I can't really remember why. I think it was just a little bit too long, but it was still an interesting look on China. Next, I want to talk about South Korea, for which I have read recently, a couple of months ago, I read Pachinko. It's by Jin Lee. It's not all set in South Korea, and the part that is set in South Korea was still at a time that Korea was not divided. But it is about a Korean family, and it's a family saga, which is always something I like. And also it's about how Koreans were treated by other countries, especially Japan, which is always interesting. The book does start in Korea with a young girl who is called Sunja, and Sunja gets pregnant by a rich entrepreneur that comes to the island regularly, which is supposed to bring shame to her and her family. Luckily for her, in the hotel or workhouse, I can't really remember what it's called, boarding house. Yes, in the boarding house of her mother, there passes a minister on his way to Japan, and he gets tuberculosis, and Sunja's mother takes care of him. And this man is so kind-hearted, he sees Sunja's problem and says, well, I will marry this girl and I will take her with me to Japan, so nobody in the village knows that she gets a baby long before she should. So he saves Sunja and her family from shame. So Sunja and her husband go to Japan, and they live with the minister's brother and his wife, and we follow them as they evolve in this Japanese culture. The family expands, they get children who are Korean, grow up in Japan, are discriminated against, don't feel Korean, are not treated as Japanese, at their turn get children, etc., etc. And there is also at one point the backdrop of the Second World War that wreaks some havoc in this family. It's a wonderful family saga. I really, really like this book. I love seeing how one generation, or especially what one generation experiences, then influences the next generation and the next generation. And I also really like the theme of growing up in a country that is different from the country you are originally from or seen as being from. And as always, it's interesting to see how one country is treated by another, and how Korea, and especially South Korea, is looked down upon by the Japanese. Love this book, highly recommend it, very well written, etc., etc. Next, last but not least, got a book that I read recently, finished recently, so talked about not that long ago, and that is In the Shadow of the Banyan by Radney Vatter, which is set in Cambodia, and I absolutely love the writing of this book. I'll post the video in which I talked about this a bit longer up here somewhere. It's about a young girl, Rami, in the 1970s, and her family. And when the Khmer Rouge, the communists, take over the country, they have to flee the capital because the Khmer Rouge are reorganizing everything, and everybody needs to work on the land to produce food. Rami and her family are of royal descent, and they can read, so that is an extra reason for them to be very scared of the Khmer Rouge, because everybody who is slightly educated, to say nothing of being of royal descent, does not get to survive very long. So through Rami's eyes, this young girl, we see what it's like when your family is ripped apart and she's transported from place to place and just trying to survive, and life becomes harder and harder and harder. I absolutely loved the writing of this. And really appreciated the references to the Cambodian religion and the myths and the stories that are told to children. I really want to own my own copy of this. I'm going to give this one back to the library today. Goodbye. But this being the last book that I've read, it's not actually a country that I have colored in yet, so I figured I would do that now. I have no idea what the effect is going to be for you guys, but hey, I thought this was going to be fun. Cambodia, it's over here. next to Vietnam. Vietnam is such a long... Vietnam just basically owns the coast. And that was also one of the things that I learned in the book, is how actually the problems that Cambodia had at the time in the Khmer Rouge, I'm gonna say problems because a lot of people died, was because of the Vietnam War and France abandoning that country and then America stepping in, etc., etc. So that was interesting. There you go, Cambodia colored in. And now I still need to write down the name of the book and the name of the author. I think I'm going to put it somewhere here in the Pacific Ocean, because the Pacific Ocean has a lot of space. But I also want it to be kind of near where Cambodia actually is, so it's gonna go here. Cambodia, under the shadow of the iron by or. There you go! Those were all of the countries that I've read for now that are set in Asia. I kind of feel ashamed because Asia is so big, and I'm, especially with India and China, not chopping them up into small enough parts. And I've still not read anything set in Japan, though I'm really interested in that country. So anyway, that was it for now. Talk to me in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in another video. Blah blah blah, all the goodness. Bye!